How are you doing? How am I doing? Baruch Hashem. It's a little bit cold here in town. Yeah, I think we should all be happy and well and healthy. But we'll start off with Tehillim as usual, and then from there we'll continue with the Gemara. Start off with chapter 20 and chapter 150 and Tzedakah. Lamnat Tzayach, Mizmor LeDavid, Yan Chadina B'Yem Saras, Agav Chashim Yatos, Yishlach Ezra Mikari Deshem, Sian Yisadeka, Yiskor Kol Mekasecha, Vailas Chayadash Nesela, Yitin Lachachil Vavecha, Vachalatzas Chayimale, Yinan Rabishu Secha, Vashem Elheinu Nidgol, Mal Yadina Kom, Nishal Secha, Ati Yadati, Kishiadine Mashicha, Yaneu, Mishmekadshe, Viguros Yisha Yaminoi, Elaborate Bail Basus and Nachnu B'Shem Adinai Elihinu Nasker Hema Karov and follow Nachnu Kam Nevani Saidad Linoy Hashia Melech Yanenu B'Yam Karenu in chapter 150 for brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. Hallelujah, hallelujah, El B'Kadshai, hallelujah, Berkia Uzai, hallelujah, B'Graisav, hallelujah, Karov Gudlai, hallelujah, Segashay for hallelujah, B'Neva V'Chiner, hallelujah, B'Seifel Machal, Minavugav, hallelujah, B'Silsalai Shama, hallelujah, B'Silsalai Serua. Hallelujah. You have a pushka to give some money, please, in the pushka. Continue with the Gemara. So we said that after Rabbi Gamaliel passed away, the world became more feeble, more weak, and unfortunately, people did not have the strength to stand and learn Torah anymore. Instead, they started sitting when they learned Torah, except for very unique individuals, very special people who really worked on themselves. Continue as a Gemara about the issue of, do you have to stand when you're learning Torah or can you sit? Let's learn from the very first person who ever learned Torah from, and who was that? Moshe Rabbeinu. I mean, who learned Torah, the Torah that was given on Har Sinai, Mount Sinai.
He said he went to Mount Sinai Yeshiva.
Correct. He went to Sinai Academy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a school in Flatbush called Sinai Academy, and I met like a teacher with many of your students. The night of Shavuos, they stay up till the whole night to learn. And the teacher says that he teaches in Sinai Academy on the 4th floor. So now it's the night of Shavuos. So he's on the 4th floor. He's in the height of Sinai Academy. So Moshe Rabbeinu, when he's learning in Sinai Academy, we learned before, Hashem told him, stand with me. And from here you see the teacher and the student must both stand and be on equal level. However, we have an apparent contradiction because Chasav Echad Omer Ve'eshev Bahar V'chasav Echad Omer Ve'anoichi Amadati Bahar in Chumash Devarim Parshas Veschanan Parshas Re'eh Moshe Rabbeinu before he passes away is giving the Jewish nation, you could call it Musar, sort of, he's chastising them what he never spoke to them during their lifetime, and telling them to continue in the ways of Hashem, and telling them how, although you messed up, you sinned after the giving of the Torah, after the greatest, holiest revelation ever to hit mankind till Mashiach. You messed it up, and I stood by it says that I went and I begged Hashem to forgive you. So first he says, I went up to the mountain to take 2 tablets of stone, not prescribed by his doctor, the 2 tablets, which Hashem gave me. The Eshev Bahar. The Eshev means, and I sat on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I did not eat bread. I did not drink water for 40 days and 40 nights. And then over here, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people what he did for them. I stayed in the mountain, and I stood on the mountain for 40 days, and Hashem listened to me, and he did not destroy the Jewish nation. So what did Moshe Rabbeinu do? Did he sit or did he stand? Very good question. There's a Rav, which he calls himself the Yarmer Rav. Have you heard of the Yarmer Rav? The Yarmer Rav. No, Yarmer is a town that never existed.
Oh.
He's a Batchin, his name is Rabbi Miller. Batchin is one who makes jokes, but a lot of mainly Torah-based jokes. So he says one time he's traveling to Israel, and you know people are always trying to smuggle in electronics or different things into the country. And he's a well-known figure in the frum circles, you know, for being a Batchin, an entertainer. And somebody tells him, "Oh, Rabbi Yankel, Rabbi Miller, Yarmer Rav, I'm so excited to see you. You know, this suitcase, he's in Ben Gurion Airport, you know, just getting off the plane. The suitcase is very heavy for me to carry. Maybe you could just hold it for me. You know, I'm very tired. I have a hard time standing. Hold it for me and just give it to me on the other side, you know, when we leave the airport." So Yarmer Rav told him, you know, it might be hard for you to stand, but it's even harder for me to sit. Sit means sit, you know, sit in prison. As hard as it is for you to stand, it's harder for me to sit. So is Moshe Rabbeinu standing or is Moshe Rabbeinu sitting on the mountain? One pasuk, one verse says that he stood, and one says that he sat. So we're going to give three answers, or sorry, four answers on this question. And it's very important to know, because for future generations, you want to know, are you allowed to sit down while learning Torah? So the Gemara will give now four answers. Amar Rav, answer number one. Says Rav, Oimeid v'loimeid yoshev v'shoinem. When Moshe Rabbeinu would learn, when Hashem would teach him, he would stand. When Moshe Rabbeinu would review what Hashem taught him, he would sit. So the halach would be in that case, based on Rav, that if one is learning Torah from his teacher, from his Rebbe, he has to stand. But if one is reviewing, one is allowed to sit. Similar to what it says in Mesechta Shabbos, that a person should first learn, afterwards he should analyze what they learned. When a teacher is teaching, you don't always have time to analyze and hear try figuring out what they're saying. Because if you try thinking and figuring out what they were saying, you're going to lose track of the next thing they're saying. First you listen, pay attention, afterwards you analyze and you go deeper into it. So the first time you learn, you're paying attention, you stand. The second time, when you're trying to concentrate and trying to ask questions and answers, then you could sit, because to help you concentrate better. That is the answer of Rav. Rav Chanina says, Lo yoshev, lo yoimeh v'lo yoshev. When Moshe Rabbeinu was learning Torah from Hashem on the mountain, during all those times that he was on the mountain, he did not stand and he did not sit. He was neither standing nor sitting. Ela shoicha. Rather, he was bending over, bowing to Hashem. It was an expression of bittul, expression of oneness with Hashem, that he didn't feel his own being at all. And therefore, you could fulfill both of these psukim. One verse, which Moshe Rabbeinu says, I have stood on the mountain, Eshu Bahar, and other pasuk which says, V'amaditi Bahar, and I stood on the mountain. So he was bowing, and therefore he was between the two of sitting and standing. Why was he like this? Says the Maharsha, because of the Shekhinah, the honor of the Shekhinah. He was standing like this. And Ben Yayada writes, Ben Ishchai, that Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching a lesson for future generations. That when listening to Torah, you should listen with humility. Mm-hmm. Listen with humility, even if you might think I'm the chacham, I'm wiser and smarter than the person teaching, which in this case, Baruch Hashem, we have Dovi and Mr. Nadich, who Baruch Hashem, I could attest, are definitely wiser and smarter than the one who's actually giving over this year. But so we learn from Moshe Rabbeinu that you should always have hachna'ah, be humble when learning Torah. That's the second answer. Rabbi Yochanan says, Ein yeshiva ela lashon akava. The word yeshiva doesn't have to mean and he sat. The word yeshiva can mean and he settled. we have a parsha called Vayeshev. It says Vayeshev Yaakov be'Eretz Canaan, and Yaakov lived, he settled in the land of Canaan. When it says Vayeshev and he sat, you think all the time he lived in Canaan? He never stood up all those years, all those 20 something years, 25 years he lived in Canaan. He never sat, he never stood up. Obviously he stood up. Vayeshev means, and he settled. And he brings a proof. Shneimar, as it says, Vateshvu v'kadesh yamim rabim. It says, and the Jews, when they were going in the desert, and they were following around Hashem's cloud of glory, and they were wandering for 40 years. And for 19 years, they had one stop. 19 years, they had one rest stop in a place called Kadesh. So it says, Vateshu v'Kadesh Yamim Rabim. Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish nation at the end of his life, and you stayed in Kadesh many days, which means 19 years. Now, were they sitting the entire 19 years? Probably not. So we could say the word Vayeshev doesn't mean necessarily sitting, it can mean settling. Now, this answer is not, you could say, the most answer which fits the pshat, because it says Moshe Rabbeinu settled on the mountain, but he started investing in the local real estate market. What does it mean he settled on the mountain? So it's not the first answer. Rather, it means it's a later answer that they actually settled in the place. Somebody says, I'm finally comfortable with the idea, and he became settled with the idea. Next, Rava says, "Rakos me'umad v'kashos miyoshav." Now, Moshe Rabbeinu, there are some Torah subjects that he learned, which were easy, material, and those he stood for. Some subjects which were harder, and those he had to sit in order to concentrate better. Meaning, some things are more difficult, and Moshe Rabbeinu was concentrating more at that time. So the Ben Ishchai, the Ben Yod asked a question. Moshe Rabbeinu being on the mountain is supernatural, correct?
Yeah.
No one was able to come close. If you came close, you died. Moshe Rabbeinu was on the mountain 3 times for 40 days. He didn't eat, he didn't drink. So Hashem gave him strength. He was physically very strong. As we see, he could move a stone off a well by himself. And Moshe Rabbeinu was able to pick up the Mishkan by himself. He was super strong. But in addition to that, Hashem had to have given him supernatural strength, not to eat or drink for 40 days, 3 times in a row, and to survive. So why didn't Hashem give Moshe Rabbeinu, according to this last answer of Rava, that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have the power to stand by the difficult subjects? Let Hashem give Moshe Rabbeinu power. He's giving him anyways a strength to not eat and drink for 40 days. Give him more strength to stand while learning Torah, while learning the difficult subjects. So he says, we see how Hashem, when Moshe wanted to show, when Moshe Rabbeinu was on the mountain, it's not merely for Moshe Rabbeinu as a one-time thing. It's a constant lesson for all generations. That to teach you that when you're learning Torah, even though it's better to stand, but if you come to a difficult subject, you're allowed to sit down. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, learning from Hashem, sat down when it came to a difficult subject. Even though Hashem gave him power and strength to stand, he didn't give him the power for a difficult subject in order that Moshe Rabbeinu could teach us that you're allowed to sit down. Now, what does it mean Hashem sits? Hashem has no physical body. Hashem doesn't stand or sit. Chassidus explains very much. When Hashem sits down, it means Hashem is settling. Hashem is settled. He is comfortable there. So when Moshe Rabbeinu was learning sitting down, Hashem also had to sit down, because we said the teacher and the disciple have to be on the same footing. Meaning Hashem, so to speak, lowered himself and brought himself down to this world in order for Moshe Rabbeinu to learn the difficult subjects. And the Karban Nesanel writes this. You know the Karban Nesanel?
Yeah, he was the relative of mine.
I have no doubt that he's related to Dovi. The Karban Nesanel, actually, you ever heard of the Pandors? The Pandors, they were a Germanic tribe, went around in like the 1600s.
Oh, I never heard of them.
The Pandors. So he writes in the conclusion of the entire Sefer, Karban Nesanel, he writes a whole story, a miraculous story, how he's in Prague, and the Pandors came, and they were doing a pogrom, killing all the Jews, and with great miracles, he was saved, and he had a revolver, and every time someone would come to the building, he would shoot out of the window. So, and he says, Baruch Hashem, we were able to eliminate many of our enemies, and he ran out, I think, of his last bullet, and he was getting ready to try everything else they could. When they became scared, they thought they had, and they ran away. So major miracles. So the Karban Nesanel writes this, and he says that Hashem lowered himself down to the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, how can Moshe Rabbeinu sit? It says that angels, so many midrashim speaking about Moshe Rabbeinu is discussing with the malachim, with the angels. We know angels don't sit.
Yeah.
Why? Because they have the Shekhinah there. They have Hashem there. They can't sit down. So how can Moshe Rabbeinu sit in heaven? So another one of Dovi's relatives, no doubt, the Eliyah Rabbah, he discusses this. He gives two answers. One thing is he brings a Gemara in Mesechta Sukkah as a Moshe Rabbeinu was lamata mesar tvachim, was given, he was lower than 10 tvachim, and the angels were lamayla mesar tvachim, were above 10 tvachim, about 40 handbreadths off the ground. But then he gives a very practical answer. He says, also is covered Torah, honor of the Torah. In order to learn Torah better, you're allowed to sit down. But he gives a practical answer. A malach, an angel, is holy, it's spiritual. Someone might see an angel, meaning a prophet of a false, of a Avodah Zarah, which Hashem gives him the ability, may see an angel and could think that they are Hashem, that they're God. Obviously not, because angels have a physical form, as we learned in Kunter Sumayin. What are the bodies of the angels made out of?
Fire, right?
Fire, that's right, fire and air.
Mm-hmm.
And they might think that this is Hashem. So therefore, they have to stand to show that they are batal, they are nullified to Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu is a human being. You're never going to mistake that, God forbid, he's Hashem. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was allowed to sit because there's no possibility to mistake him, God forbid, as Hashem. Let's continue the Gemara onto the next page. So we're holding on the last line of the page and the last line in the second half of the line. Going back to the topic. Of hearing two people reading the Megillah simultaneously. Are you allowed to have two people reading the Megillah at the same time? And if two people are reading at the same time, which could happen, let's say you're in a show like 770, and you're a Minyan factory and there's Minyanim going around, and you're hearing two people reading at the same time. Could you be Yitzchak? Can you fulfill your obligation? Mishnah said yes, because they love the mitzvah so much of hearing the Megillah, they'll make sure to concentrate on one specific reading and not on two readings. How about Torah reading? Could you hear two people reading the Torah simultaneously? How about you have a person who comes and he gets an aliyah in shul, he's very excited. And the person who gets an aliyah in shul, he reads along with the bakari, with the Torah reader. And he's reading it out loud. And everyone tells him, be quiet. But I guess maybe he's hard of hearing, so he can't hear himself. So he's reading, and the whole shul is hearing him read together with the bakari. is people, it's disturbing for everyone else in the show. They're trying to hear the Baal Kaira, the Torah reader, and the person getting the Aliyah is reading out loud. Is that an issue? By Megillah, it's not an issue, we said. When you get an Aliyah for the Torah, you're supposed to read along. Because as we said, as the Mishnah writes the words, Kara, you called up a person to read the Torah. Whoever got an Aliyah used to read the Torah themselves. And like the Yemenites still do it till today. And some of them prepare the whole parsha every single week in case they get called up to the Torah. If someone is hearing two Torah readings at the same time, he's not Yitzchak, he's not fulfilled his obligation. It's disturbing. As if they're reading at the same time. The one getting the Aliyah should read along because you're supposed to read your own Aliyah, and especially you made a bracha, a blessing, and therefore you want the blessings to go on the words that you're saying, preferably. If you're listening, it's fine, as long as you're paying attention. But if you're looking around and thinking of, I don't know, what's the Steelers draft pick going to be, then it might be a question of a bracha l'vatala, of a bracha for unnecessary bracha. So you should read together with the Baal Kaira, read it slowly and quietly that only he could hear. If he didn't hear it, he's still Yaitse b'di'eved. He still has fulfilled his obligation. Now we'll get into a little bit more of this halacha after we learn this next topic. So says the Gemara, if one person read the Megillah, or two people read the Megillah, out loud, simultaneously for everybody, the congregation have fulfilled their obligation. What is halacha when it comes to Mikra Megillah, reading, Kriyas HaTorah, the reading of the Torah? So you could turn the pages now to Chaf Aleph Amud Beis 21b. You put a 200 in front of that. What address would you get? 221b.
221B.
Baker Street, to live there. So that's your homework for after this year. 221b Baker Street. So we're on 21b.
My mother's maiden name was Baker.
Oh yeah? That's right. Tana. Masha came back to Torah. When it comes to Torah reading, you cannot have two people reading simultaneously because it's difficult to hear two people reading at the same time. During the war, Reb Chaim Oizer Gordinsky, he was a Rav in Vilna. He was a Rav during World War I, and the Rebbe was actually had a very close connection with him, and then died right after the Nazi invasion of Vilna during World War II. He's buried. I'm saying the Nazis invaded, but they didn't yet start putting the Jews into ghettos. They just started killing them on the streets. But that's when he passed away, like within a week or two of the Nazis invading Vilna during World War II. So Reb Chaim Oizer during World War I, there's so many people coming to him with issues that two people would talk at the same time and he would answer them one after the next in order to save time. So generally, two people speaking at the same time is very disturbing. When two people speak at the same time, it's hard to concentrate and hard to understand, except when it comes to reading the Megillah. Because when it comes to reading the Megillah, a person loves a mitzvah and they're able to concentrate on one specific one. Tana Rabbanan and our rabbis have taught, but Torah, echad kollel ve'echad metargem. When it comes to reading the Torah, you have one person who reads the Torah out loud and one who translates. It used to be the custom in the old times, in the olden days, they would have a metargem, someone who would translate the Torah.
And the Eretz still have it.
Really?
I think so.
And it's translated in Arabic into what language?
It's Arabic, if I'm not mistaken.
You have somebody translating the Torah into the language spoken by the people. Sometimes we'll add a little halacha or add a little medrash into the explanation, into the translation that we're giving. But you can't do it simultaneously. You can't have the person translating out loud while the Balkar is reading the Torah. But you should not have one person reading and two people translating simultaneously. Because then you have one person reading, when they're translating, you can't hear the translator. So if two people can't even translate the Torah simultaneously, for sure, two people cannot read the actual Torah simultaneously. What you're being yet to the mitzvah with is hearing the Torah reading. Translation is not for you to do the mitzvah. Rather, it's to understand it better. And therefore, if you can't have two translators simultaneously, then for sure you cannot have two Torah readers simultaneously. That's by the Torah. How about the half Torah? The reading which comes after. Uvehalf Torah. Uvanavi echad kaya yushnayim etargamin. When it comes to reading from the prophets, you have one person who can read, and two people could translate at the same time. If you have a big shul, two people could talk at two different sides of the shul. It might be disturbing for some, but it's not as important for everyone to understand the words of the Haftarah, the Navi. But it is very important for everyone to understand the words of the Torah, because if someone does not understand the Haftarah, because two people were speaking at the same time, it's a rabbinical obligation, and therefore they did not fulfill properly in the best way understanding a rabbinical obligation. However, there's no mitzvahs in Navi. Right? All 613 mitzvahs are all in the Torah. There's no mitzvahs that are given to us in Navi. All the other mitzvahs are given to us in Mishnah, Gemara, but not in Navi. Therefore, if somebody makes a mistake in the translation of the Torah because they misunderstood, they could be making a mistake in an actual commandment, the halacha, which is known to everyone, which has to be known. So there it's important to pay attention. But if somebody wasn't able to understand what was said in Navi because there's too many voices going on at the same time, it's not a big deal because there's no mitzvahs that they're missing out on. Uva Halel, Uva Megillah, Afilu Asara Kairin Vasara Metargamin. When it comes to reading Hallel, there are different ways, different methods of reading the Hallel. It says in Mesechta Sukkah. Well, the original way of saying Hallel was that one person said it and everyone answered Hallelujah at the end of every paragraph, according to one day. And if one person said Hallel and everyone answered, for sure you fulfilled your obligation. But if multiple people said Hallel, then it's fine. You know, there's a saying, so when it comes to people speaking, if two people speak at the same time, it's very disturbing. When it comes to singing, if two people sing at the same time, it's very beautiful. And the more people singing, the nicer it is. Why is that? It says, usually speaking, you want people to hear what you have to say. But a nigun, the singing is going out of yourself. And therefore, the other person only enhances you. So when it comes to the Hallel could be done in a way of singing. If 10 people say the Hallel or sing the Hallel, and you answer Hallelujah at the end, you have fulfilled your obligation. The Megillah, he said, it's the same thing as well. Rashi removes the word Vasar Metargamin, means you can have 10 people reading the Megillah simultaneously, and you have fulfilled your obligation. My time, what's the reason? Why is Megillah something that many people can read at once and you are Yotzei, but the Torah reading of a regular Shabbos and Yom Tiv, you need only one person to read it. You can't have two people. What's unique about Megillah? Hallel, we understand. Maybe Hallel is a song. More people sing it together. What about the Megillah? The Gemara says, Kiven, the Chaviva, Yahavi, Datayu, Vishami. Since people love, they look forward, they cherish Megillah reading, so therefore people pay very close attention. So too Hallel. Hallel, we say it. It says Yisrael Mimitz. We left Egypt. It's also very cherished by people. We love to hear miracles and love to hear good news.
Yeah, but excuse me, doesn't that, indicate or imply that the people don't cherish the Torah? That doesn't make sense.
You're saying the people who don't cherish the Torah, that what?
I mean, you're saying that since the Megillah is cherished by the congregation,
right,
and the Torah isn't cherished by the congregation.
Because you're saying because it's not a miracle.
No, I'm saying it definitely is cherished. The Torah is definitely cherished by the congregation, as much as the Megillah. No.
So the Rosh Yosef says, he says Megillah comes once a year. Torah reading, although it's a different Torah reading every time, every week, but you hear it every single week. It's not as exciting. That's the Rosh Yosef explains.
Okay.
Well, after Reb Shlomo Chaim, I don't know how many of you are familiar with him. Reb Shlomo Chaim, that was for a different Gemara. I don't think we need this open. Reb Shlomo Chaim Kesselman, he was a great mashpia in Eretz Yisrael. He had a very unique talent. This is Reb Shlomo Chaim. He had a very special, unique talent he had an immense love to Bachar, immense love to people. And he literally transformed probably thousands of yeshiva students in Israel, Eretz Yisrael, made them chassidim, taught them to be chassidim. And he passed away in the year Tafshin Lamed Hey 1975. So after he passed away, eventually Reb Mendel Futterfass was, you could say, sent by the Rebbe to take over his place in Eretz Yisrael to become the mashpia afterwards. Mendel Futterfass, we've mentioned him several times, quite a colorful, unique chassid. He was living in England. He was actually in business, and the Rebbe, he left Russia in 1964, just a couple of years before that. And the Rebbe sent him to become mashpia in Eretz Yisrael, and he did. Came mashpia in the main yeshiva in Kfar Chabad. However, there is another great chassid named Reb Sadia Liberov. He was a very Reb Sadia Liberov. This is him. So Reb Sadia Liberov. Looks like there's a sefer, a book came out about him. All these articles. A very special, unique chassid as well. Already from the times of the Frierdiker Rebbe, 1927, the Frierdiker Rebbe said that the Frierdiker Rebbe said is a certain mimer with 4 levels of a malik. What a malik is by a regular person, Yetzer Hara, what a malik is by a ben Torah, by a Torah student, and what a malik is, he said, by a very, like a tzaddik, he didn't say. Reb Sadia Liberov came after that Shabbos, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said, had you come, I would have been able to say another level of a malik, meaning because a more smaller level of a malik, someone like who's on a higher level, how they could experience it, their struggles in Avodas Hashem. So Reb Sadia Liberov, he was a shliach in Morocco for a while, and then he moved. He was in Antwerp in Belgium. Till today, I meet many, many people who grew up in Belgium, and they all have only tremendously special things to say about Reb Sadia Liberov. A very special, unique Jew. His son was still living. One's in England, one's in France.
Where did he live?
So, I mean, he was born in Russia and he was shliach in Morocco for a short time in the 50s, early 60s, but he lived most of his life after that in Belgium.
I like his hat that they made.
That's him at a young age, yeah.
Yes, we're in Belgium.
Antwerp.
Antwerp.
You have cousins there, I'm sure.
Yes,
Yes.
it is.
And so Reb Sadia Librov, a very special, unique individual. He learned Chassidus with many, many people. There's a Rebbe good who had tremendous respect for him. He was known in Belgium as everyone had tremendous, looking up to him in a tremendous way. They asked him to go to become mashpia in Eretz Yisrael. Mashpia means like a mentor in yeshiva, like the guide for all the yeshiva students to guide them. This is Reb Shlomo Chaim, the one who passed away, 1975. And this is Reb Sadia Librov. So 1975, they asked him, come move to Eretz Yisrael, move to Kfar Chabad, and become the mashpia in the main Chabad yeshiva in Israel, and to guide a whole generation of Bachrim, whole generation of Chabad, which is a very necessary job. It's a very, you need someone very special, suited. Mendel Futterfass, who took over, was, a very famous Mendel Futterfass. Shlomo Chaim beforehand. So he said like this, he gave an answer. He said, today's Thursday, right? He said, V'hu Rachum today? The special tachlim that we say for Mondays and Thursdays. He said, V'hu Rachum? He says, everyone says V'hu Rachum Mondays and Thursdays. He doesn't see anybody get majorly excited, majorly emotional, majorly, awakened, this oider. Amazingly inspired on a regular Monday and Thursday. On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when we daven, and many of the things we say, you see people are extremely inspired, davening with their whole heart. It says, many of the things that we say and we read, we daven on Monday and Thursday, and Sheni v'Chamishi and V'urachum, many of the things, if you look at it, are much more heart-wrenching, emotional, much more conducive to becoming awakened, to becoming excited, much more than many of the things that we say on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which people become extremely, awakened, inspired about. And he says, why? He says, because since it's on every Monday and Thursday, it happens all the time.
Rabbi, can
Yes.
I disturb it for a second?
Sure.
Oh, okay. You approved my buddy from Israel. Yeah, I gave him the link if you don't mind.
Yaakov.
He wanted to join. Yeah, he wanted to join the class.
Yaakov, thank you for joining. You bring simcha. You know what Yaakov stands for? Yaakov stands for Yayin, Arak, Cognac, Bira. When you come, you make it exciting.
I hope he can hear you. I don't see him responding.
Cognac and Bira.
And Arak is actually a drink, and also the last name of
Correct.
of the Arak rabbinical family.
Right. Arak, like your ancestor. So he says, but the reason why people don't get excited when they're davening on Mondays and Thursdays, although what you're saying could be so much more awakening when you daven on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is because it's there every Monday and Thursday. He says, right now I live in Belgium, and when I go to Eretz Yisrael, it's something exciting and unique. People want to hear what you have to say. If I lived in Eretz Yisrael, he says, people wouldn't be excited about it, because you have it every day, even if they know there's something unique to listen to. So same thing, Megillah comes once a year, and therefore people are excited or more prone to paying attention to it. But when it comes to Torah reading, true, it's a different Torah reading every day, but it's the same Torah that's being read every single week. And so people have less excitement about it. The Riedel Neil, he lives in Lille, a city in France. He says the Megillah is more special because there's a nest. The whole thing is a miracle. And people have a special affinity to discuss, to become excited about the miracles. The difference would be a miracle in the Torah, for example, Shir Sayam, Az Yashir. would two people be allowed to read it simultaneously? According to this reason, people are excited about miracles. You would think you'll be allowed to. And the Sifsei Chachamim says that that's even such a parsha, you can't. We don't, once you can't have two people reading the Torah together, you can't read the Torah two people together at any time.
In a way, I was thinking actually you could say actually that the miracle Purim has a special tune, specialness to it actually that you don't have the splitting of the sea, because with the splitting of the sea, it's an obvious miracle. Seas don't split, right? But over here, you have this we can even see in our own lives. You know, there's like little things that by themselves are no miracle. Right? In others, a king actually can't sleep. Right? Each of the things, and yet they all come together and becomes, you know, statistically.
Correct. Yeah. You're saying there's something very a good point to the Megillah. The Megillah, if you look at every event individually, is not necessarily a miracle.
Yeah.
But if you step back and look at the whole thing as a picture, wow, look what happened. But it took place over the course of 14 years. You look at your own life. If you look at your day to day, not necessarily is your life so unique. Take back, look at like the Megillah. Look at the last 14 years as a one unit, and look where you were 14 years ago, and where Hashem put you today, and what it took to get there. And you'll see also many, many miracles.
Oh, definitely.
So although it's preferable, of course, and the way it used to be is you called someone for an aliyah and they would read the Torah. Nowadays, even if the person you're calling up is a Bal Koreh, a professional Torah reader, he does not read the Torah, because since they installed a Bal Koreh, someone who is proficient in reading the Torah, because many people don't know how to read, how to learn. So once they installed the Bal Koreh, they said there's no difference. They're not going to let some people read for themselves and some people not, because everyone will be embarrassed. I'm not going to be reading the Torah. People are going to think I don't know how to read. So therefore, the Bal Koreh always reads the Torah, even if the person they're calling up is fluent, is a baki, they're professional Bal Koreh. Still, the Bal Koreh is the one who reads the Torah. We have a similar thing. In the Beis HaMikdash, they had the Bikurim. What are Bikurim? First fruits that were brought as a gift to the Kohanim, to Hashem. So there were some people, many Jews, who didn't know how to read Hebrew, even living in Israel. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
And therefore, they had to repeat word for word after the Kohen. So they made the rule that every single person who comes to the Beis HaMikdash repeats word for word after the Kohen what to say. It's called a vidui, confession they make for the first fruits when they're bringing a carbon, a sacrifice. Every single person will repeat word for word after the Kohen, even if this person was someone who knew the entire thing inside out by heart, because we don't want to embarrass anybody, and therefore everybody has to go into the same rule. And it's the same rule when it comes to many, many things in Yiddishkeit. We don't want to embarrass anyone. Tachrichim, shrouds, burial shrouds. Everyone has the same exact one. Whether the wealthiest person and the poorest person, they all have a simple linen, tachrichim, burial shrouds, all of the same type. We don't bury in fancy suits with ties. We bury all in white linen clothes, preferably brand new, that was never used for anything. In order not to embarrass the poor people, everyone was the same. The Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim Gaon, he lived in Spain in the 1300s. He says in this Gemara that if you have two people reading at the same time, sometimes you might hear a few words from one, a few words from the other, but you're not going to hear only one of them the entire time. Now, if you're hearing a few words from one, a few words from the other, you're probably going to be missing something. So if two people are reading the Megillah at the same time, you're going to be missing something if you're hearing one and the other. So something which you don't have a special affinity to, he says, you're going to sort of switch back and forth. So Torah reading, not necessarily people have the same affinity as Megillah reading, look and shul. By the Megillah reading, look and shul by the Torah reading, and tell me which one is the shul more full,
That's actually.
or which one people snuck out for the Kiddush club.
Exactly. And also what happens if you miss actually the communal, the Torah reading, you're not obligated to go make it up, but with the Megillah, it's an individual thing, you gotta be, either you're gonna do it yourself, or you're gonna, somebody else do it for you, but you gotta be yomtzi. On an individual level.
So that's how he gives his own thing. He says, so when it comes to Megillah reading, you'll do your best to focus only on one person. When it comes to Torah reading, you'll, in your mind, switch back and forth, and then you're going to miss something of the Torah reading. So we'll pause the Gemara, and we'll pause, I think, the Shiur for today. It's 11:56. And Emir Hashem will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. our time.